One-Hit Wonder by Thomas J. Misuraca. Gary Mullins was wedged beneath a desk when his song came on the radio. He inadvertently uttered a noise of surprise. "Do you know this song?" a young coworker asked. He stood at the entrance of his cubicle, waiting for Gary to change his Ethernet connection. "Yeah," Gary replied. "It's pretty old." "Mid-'80s, I think. It's Flashback Friday." "I haven't heard this one in a while." Gary lied. The song was constantly running through his head. "Really? It gets airplay all the time." "Does it?" Gary knew the song was played in 80s clubs all over the world. Talk about your one-hit wonder. They sure were. But they shouldn't have been. There were other songs on the album that were just as good or better. But the band couldn't get a second single on the radio, no matter how much their A&R woman promoted it. "Wonder what happened to them." "The lead singer left after their first album to go solo," Gary told him. But his album flopped. Bummer. Gary neglected to mention that the keyboardist wrote the songs for the band. The lead singer was jealous of his talent and the fact that he would get all the song publishing money. The keyboardist was a terrible singer and couldn't find another band that appreciated his songwriting talents. He thought about making an instrumental electronic album, but that required more money than his one-hit song made. His exploration into electronic music gave him the experience he needed to become an IT guy. Now his keyboard sat collecting dust in the basement of the house he bought from the royalties of that song. Though the album was long out of print, the single appeared on numerous 80s collections. It was even used in a commercial and a couple of movies. "This blows away most of today's music," the guy told him. This surprised Gary. Most of today's youth laughed at the cheesy 80s sound. He'd hoped some modern artist would cover it, or at least sample it in a song. "Yeah, they don't write them like this anymore," Gary agreed. He wanted to confess that he wrote it, that their video was shown a few times on MTV, and it prominently featured a much thinner version of Gary. The kid could look it up on YouTube. And that his band once toured as the opener for Missing Persons on a West Coast leg of their tour. But he wasn't ready for the round of questions this revelation always provoked. Gary would have loved to put the band back together, but every time he tried, some member had an issue, usually the lead singer. He thought about finding a new lead singer and producing a new album. Then they'd book their first world tour. They got lots of royalties from Sweden. After that, he'd take a job as a celebrity judge on one of those talent shows, which he watched but hated on principle. Gary couldn't concentrate on the task at hand while he daydreamed about the life he could have had. "Why don't you go to lunch?" he suggested to the kid. "This may take a while." Gary always worked through lunch because that was the only time he could get to most coworkers' computers. "Okay," the kid said. He turned off his radio just as the song ended. The kid hummed the melody as he left the composer wedged under his desk.